the head of the World Health Organization, or WHO, warned the risks of returning to lockdown if countries emerging from pandemic restrictions do not manage transitions extremely carefully and in a phased approach. Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus listed a series of steps needed before countries lift measures designed to control the spread of COVID-19. He defended the WHO's record on warning about the potential for human-to-human transmission of the new coronavirus, saying it informed the world of that in early January. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo reiterated his widely contested charge that the coronavirus pandemic likely originated in a Chinese laboratory, demanding again that it share information about the outbreak. He renewed his call for global pressure on China to provide more data on the origins of the illness. Pompeo said China was still withholding virus samples he says are needed for global vaccine research, and rejected suggestions that Washington was being unfair to Beijing. Turkey said it has brought the coronavirus outbreak under control 2 months after it first erupted across the country, and will set out new social guidelines and business practices to prevent any resurgence. Turkey has one of the highest numbers of recorded COVID-19 cases in the world, but has kept the death toll well below levels in Western Europe and the US, and the government is now looking to gradually reopen the economy. Around 150,000 people will be scanned across the country next week as part of efforts to assess the latest status of the outbreak. The Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, will meet on May 11th to consider Egypt's request for a rapid financing instrument loan. Egypt asked the IMF for financial support to help it deal with the new coronavirus outbreak last month, and is seeking a standby arrangement loan as well as the emergency financing under the RFA. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli said last week Egypt was seeking the help because the coronavirus crisis was putting pressure on tourism and other major sources of foreign currency. The United States will provide $225 million in emergency aid to Yemen to support food programs, as aid groups there are forced to scale down operations due to interference by the Houthi militias and amid a spreading coronavirus outbreak. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said this assistance will provide the UN World Food Programme's emergency food operation in southern Yemen, as well as reduced operation in northern Yemen, which the WFP was forced to scale down earlier this month because of the ongoing interference of Houthis. Israeli occupation announced a plan for thousands of new Jewish settlement homes in the occupied West Bank as Washington boasts readiness to back de facto Israeli annexations there. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo plans to visit Israel next week, a sign that he is weighing in on a territorial issue that has been a centerpiece of Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition building efforts. Fresh construction for the settlement of Efrat was approved on land that could accommodate around 7,000 housing units. Only a handful of Lebanese lenders are expected to emerge from an economic rescue plan that many banks, who are among the government's biggest creditors, oppose because it would wipe out $20.6 billion in shareholder capital. The association is working on a financial rescue plan that would preserve some of banks' capital rather than writing it off as the government has proposed. Iran warned of a rising trend this week of the COVID-19 outbreak as it said 1,680 new infections took its overall caseload beyond the 100,000 mark. Iran has struggled to contain the Middle East's deadliest coronavirus outbreak since announcing its first cases in mid-February. Concerns were raised last month about the threat of a second wave of the virus in a report by Parliament that criticised the government's slow response. Scrambling to tackle COVID-19 in camps across the Middle East, the UN agency supporting Palestinian refugees said it only has enough cash to operate until the end of May because of American funding cuts. Elizabeth Campbell, UNRWA's director in Washington, told reporters that the loss of US aid had a corrosive impact on the agency's ability to help vulnerable people. She said UNRWA had only secured a third of its $1.2 billion annual budget and that it was suffering its worst financial crisis since beginning operations some 70 years ago. Head of Libyan Government of National Accord Fayez Sarraj announced accepting to launch negotiations with the leader of Libyan National Army, Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar. Sarraj called for a new roadmap which includes holding general elections. In other news, Audit Bureau in Tripoli announced that one of its employees was kidnapped by armed militias affiliated with GNA's Interior Ministry. Domestic violence is on the rise globally during the COVID-19 pandemic compared to other crimes, including in Turkey and Palestine. The crime rate in Palestine has decreased significantly compared to violence against women. These figures remain relatively low compared to domestic violence in Israel, which witnessed a 16% increase. Egypt's Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and his South African counterpart Naledi Pandor discussed the challenges posed by the coronavirus pandemic in Africa and affirmed the need for African cooperation. In a phone call, Shoukry and Pandor stressed the importance of coordinating efforts of the African nations to face the novel coronavirus, which has killed almost 260,000 people worldwide and has been contracted by over 3,755,713. The air bridge between Kuwait and Cairo to return stranded Egyptians in Kuwait continues for the fourth day in a row as more Egyptians left on board 3 flights of the Kuwaiti Airways. All Egyptian passengers have been checked out upon arrival at Kuwait International Airport and their luggage was disinfected as part of precautionary measures to combat the spread of the coronavirus. The Egyptian authorities urged Egyptians who are staying at the Kuwaiti shelters to abide by all instructions of the Kuwaiti security authorities and not to follow any attempts for raising riots and chaos. The International Council of Nurses said at least 90,000 healthcare workers worldwide are believed to have been infected with COVID-19, and possibly twice that amid reports of continuing shortages of protective equipment. The disease has killed more than 260 nurses, it said in a statement, urging authorities to keep more accurate records to help prevent the virus from spreading among staff and patients. Health workers and first responders battling the coronavirus have been hailed and applauded as heroes. The United Arab Emirates Nuclear Energy Corporation CEO said that the coronavirus crisis has not impacted operational timetable of the country's first nuclear plant. According to the company's statement, hot functional testing on Unit 2 has been successfully completed. The statement explained that HFT takes place over a number of weeks and consists of almost 200 individual and integrated tests performed on major systems to check their performance under normal operational conditions without the presence of nuclear fuel in the reactor.